Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today, before we get into the project, I want to show you the brand new sets from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. They just released 7 new sets and they are so cute, and some are just perfect for fall. This one right here, Greetings from Kansas, is a beautiful sunflower set. Lots of detail there. You've got jumbo and regular peg stamps in there. Oh, this one right here, Itty Bitty Pumpkin Patch. You can see this is some smaller ones. This would be great for tiny projects or to mix in with other sets like this one here, Autumn Elegance. Now I don't keep my stamps in these packages that they come in. I actually like to keep them in a upright in a drawer, and I'll show you that after I show you these sets, just to give you an idea on how I store them, because I find that I love mixing my stamps together, and being able to see them all at a glance at once helps me make the best use out of my sets. So as you start to collect more, you may want to switch over to like a shoebox or something where you can have them all on their ends so you can see what all the stamps are. And let's see, I think those, oh, we got one more fall one I want to show you. Autumn Glory, and this is nice. It's got some like little mums and ferns and almost like a marigold. They look like a marigold there, and you can see on the end the size of the stamps. And then there's also a single, which is a turkey, which could be really cute for Thanksgiving place cards or any other little Thanksgiving crafts, maybe doing some stamping on clay and making some earrings, some polymer clay earrings. So that's kind of cute, just on its own, that you can mix with other sets that you have. Now another neat thing are these cactus stamps you have coming out. This one is a Build a Prickly Pear Cactus, and I just think that is so adorable. You can stamp the different segments and sections to make your own cactus, and I think that's really clever and fun, and I think that I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that set. This one right here, Cactus Terrarium, would be perfect for stamping inside of a like a pot or any sort of like you know, globe or, you know, clear item like that. I think it'd be kind of funny in a snow globe too, I think. And here we have Desert Cactus, which again is another bunch of cacti that you could mix and match with these other sets. So lots of great new inspiration there from Rubber Stamp Tapestry. I will have a coupon code in the video description to save you 20% on your stamps, so make sure you check that out if you're going to do any shopping. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the project. This is the organization that I told you about. This is just an old drawer that I kept from a kind of old broken chest of drawers, and I just made dividers out of foam core, and I put my stamps in with the pegs facing up, and then I cut all my index sheets down and just tucked them in the back so I can easily find the stamps and the stamp sets that they come from. And this is easy to retrieve them. I wrote the set names on the sides of my peg stamps so I would know where they went, and this goes on a shelf underneath my desk. I knew I wanted to have some multimedia dimensional elements on this card, so what I did was grabbed a couple scraps of cardstock and I stamped a terracotta plant pot 3 times on some kind of rusty orange cardstock, and then I stamped a tin milk container, like milk bucket, and also a wagon onto these scraps of silver cardstock, because I'm going to be embellishing them with acrylic paint in a minute. I'm using a palette knife to mix up some colors and apply it right onto the cardstock. I've got some tan, white, and brown, and I'm just kind of spackling it on there. I want to get the texture of old patinaed clay pots, and I figured these colors would be great for that. I also grabbed a little green and teal because I thought I might want to mix a little of that in to give it a little bit of a kind of mossy, moldy look as well, because it just makes it look a little bit more realistic. Don't try to make it too perfect. You definitely want this to look very random and natural. I decided to apply the kind of patina color with a damp sea sponge. So what you do is you wet the sponge, you squeeze out the extra water, you dab it in the paint, and then you pounce it on, and then just let it be. And that's really all you need to do to get like a really realistic look. Once that's dry, we can stamp our images again and trim them out. We're going to do the same effect with the silver cardstock, except we're going to use cooler shades. So I'm using a combination of blue, gray, and a little bit of brown there, but it's going to really just make some kind of gray colors that we'll scrape on over the cardstock. You only need to cover the area that you're going to end up cutting out. So just try to keep it, you know, just pretty loose and with tiny little pats so you get that galvanization look. While the acrylic painting is drying, we're going to want to stamp any of those images that we've already stamped for the acrylic portion. We want to stamp that on cardstock so we can do some normal stamping. Since I do not want to ink up the buckets that are on this stamp, I'm using a marker to ink up just the wagon. I'm going to want to be stamping pumpkins into the wagon, so I don't want those buckets there. So carefully, using any water-based marker, just ink up the areas that you wish to stamp and press it on your paper. Make sure you stamp your images on each sheet of white paper so that you can have kind of a guideline in order to do your stamping. We're going to be covering up the pots and the metal parts from the bucket and the wagon when we're all done. And since these were new, I did have to trim off a little of the extra rubber. Now I did speed this up so you can kind of see how I'm arranging everything, but it'll also make it go a lot quicker because you've all seen my peg stamp videos before and you know how I arrange things. But just in case you're new, I try to stamp my largest things first, and then I stamp my medium-sized items and then my smaller items. And then sometimes I'll go in and fill in the middle if I need to. And sometimes I will just kind of smush my ink pad on my craft mat and do a little painting if I have line artwork like these sunflowers are. These are such a pretty bunch of new sets that Rubber Stamp Tapestry has. I love how there's a lot of really full images that are really quick to create with. Another quick and easy way to get a full painterly look when you have line artwork is to stamp your flowers down and then quickly spread the ink around with a paintbrush. That will still retain some of your crisp stamped lines, but it will also drag a little of the color around, giving you a very painterly and colored look on your image. And then you can always go through with ink and a brush and fill in as you go. The pumpkins were so fun to stamp, and I used stamps from both of the new pumpkin sets for this, and I'll have all of those stamp sets linked up in the video description so you can check it out. But I find that with most of these stamps, especially solid stamps like these pumpkins, by inking them in a couple colors at once, I get a nice like shadow effect, and it's so easy. And then just tuck in a few little leaves and vines and you are good to go. Another way to get a really great look quickly is to use a combination of ink pads and markers. So I am stamping the stamp, these daisies, in a combination of either yellow, orange, or kind of reddish ink, but I'm using a brown marker to do the centers, and that gives me that beautiful definition and makes really quick work of stamping this image. And then of course you can stamp your leaves in and fill in your design as usual. Now I have to admit, when I originally stamped on the scraps of cardstock and added the paint, I was hoping I'd be able to see my lines through later, but I couldn't. So I'm using Staz-on ink, which is an alcohol-based ink. Think of a Sharpie in an ink pad, that's a kind of ink it is. And I'm using that to stamp my plant pots back on over the acrylic paint. And I have to do the same thing with the wagon and the milk can as well. But that'll give me my guidelines so I can cut everything out. And that's what I'm going to do next. It's hard to believe that a few scrapes and sponges of color can make the plant pots look so realistic, but I'm really happy with the way they look. Speaking of cutting things out, you can go ahead and die cut the stamped images that you did on the white cardstock as well. I ended up cutting all of my images out with the fancy Spellbinders die there. I know a lot of you guys have that, but you can use whatever shape you like. And I'm just using blending brushes and some ink to color in the background. Now you can ink right on top of the wagon. It doesn't matter because that is going to be covered up with the acrylic paint pieces that we just trimmed out. You want to do that for each of the panels that you die cut. And then you're simply going to glue the piece that you cut out that had the acrylic paint on it right on top of the image, and it's going to give you a fantastic, realistic three-dimensional look. I really love the look of the patina on the clay pots. I think they turned out really well. So just do that same process for each of the panels that you colored. I cut 2 sheets of cardstock in half and folded them in half to make A2 size cards, and I found a 6x6 paper pack that I thought had some really interesting background papers. So what I'm doing is trimming these papers down to about 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I'm going to use those to be the matte layers on my card bases. Here you can see the 4 backgrounds that I chose. Now there are scraps left over from each of those papers because I had to trim them down a little bit, and it was double-sided paper, so I do have a little more options for patterns that way, but I still felt like I wanted some more variety. So I took some washi tape and just stuck it down on that pattern paper and then used a maple leaf punch to punch out some embellishments. Since washi tape is kind of translucent, I'm going to be able to see some of that pattern and color underneath the tape, and that's just going to make sure that those little embellishments that I'm making with a maple leaf punch will coordinate with the cards that I made. It's nothing fancy, but it's a great way to use up your scraps and make sure everything's coordinated. I also used some of the skinnier strips of leftover paper to act as border, kind of like how you'd use a ribbon. I just think that also helps everything stay coordinated, and it looks really nice. And you can see that was actually the back side of that pattern because it was double-sided paper. I ran into a little bit of a problem though. Because everything was so well coordinated, I didn't have a lot of contrast, and I was having a hard time with my embellishments standing up or standing out on my card. So I kind of played around with some crocheted flowers that I crocheted a long time ago, and they've been sitting in my stash, and the maple leaves, and was really having a hard time to figure out what to put where. I had punched some circles out of an old background that I made with just Distress Oxide inks in a previous peg stamp video, and I thought that would at least give me a almost not a solid area, but kind of a grounding area that I could put the embellishments down on. I did end up using one of my crocheted flowers, and to stick it down I put a little hot glue on one of those circles and just tapped it into place, and then topped it off with a wooden button in the center. Again, I didn't want to do anything that was too contrasty because I like the muted palette. It's just going to be tough to kind of balance having enough contrast so that things stand out from one another and it doesn't just look like a big mush, but also to have some interest in your card. So it's a balancing act, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. The bottom line is to just keep practicing and playing with your supplies and putting stuff together until you're happy with the way it looks. It's pretty fun to do. And if you feel like you need a little bit more interest, just grab a strip of that washi tape and overlap it on a pattern paper border strip, and you will get a nice little edge element that will make your focal point stand out a little bit more. Now sometimes you finish your card, but it's just not quite there yet. So what I like to do is grab some colored pencils and add a little bit of shading. So on the pot you can use shades of brown and terracotta. On the ground you can use shades of green. You can even use some shades of brown to bring out the centers and the flowers. Whatever you think you need to give that illustration a little bit of pop. It might be adding a little bit of yellow on the flower petals, whatever you think it needs. And I went around and I altered each of the cards in this series until I felt they all looked pretty good. And always a little white gel pen will give you a nice highlight and really make it kind of sparkle and bring out a lot of the detail that you might be missing. Now for the embellishments, it didn't seem to want to stand out. Go around them with a fine black pen, and that will make them stand out from that circle element and really give it that pop that it needs. I hope you found this tutorial useful. I had a lot of fun making these cards, and now I have a set of fall themed cards for birthdays or thank you notes or whatever else I need this season. If you'd like to find the products that I used today, check out the video description. I'll have all these products linked up down below so you can find them at Rubber Stamp Tapestry. They have a bunch of brand new sets and they are so much fun to work with. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you again so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.